All right, so today we're going to dive into some pretty heavy stuff. We're talking about life and death and the possibility that our understanding of both is maybe way too limited.
Yeah, it's a question that I think has fascinated humanity for as long as we've been around, right? Like, what happens after we die? It's the big
It
question.
is, and for the most part, science seems to present a pretty straightforward answer, right? It's like lights out, game over. But what's so interesting is that there's actually a whole body of evidence, including research that was funded by the CIA, that suggests things might be a lot more complex than that.
You're talking about the Gateway Project, right? That declassified document from 2003 that really kind of delved into out-of-body experiences.
Yes, and what's really cool about that is how the Gateway Project's findings about consciousness and these altered states of awareness actually align with some of the experiences that people like Darius J. Wright and Energy Masta have described. They talk about these profound out-of-body experiences and accessing information beyond the physical realm. And it's almost like their accounts are echoing what the CIA was researching.
It really does make you wonder why, if there's evidence like that, science still seems to shy away from the idea of life after death.
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's almost like we're stuck in this limited way of thinking about life. Like maybe it's not just about our physical bodies in this material world, but something much grander, something that extends beyond what we can currently perceive or even measure.
Yeah, and that's where this idea of a language of reality comes in, right? That maybe what we call life is really just this limited translation of a much larger experience shaped by energy and information, and maybe even a kind of cosmic language that we're just beginning to understand.
Okay, hold on, let me catch up here. So we're talking about an actual language that underlies reality itself.
Yeah, think of it like this. The universe is filled with all this energy and information, right? It's constantly interacting, flowing, transforming. It's this incredibly complex dance, but our human minds need some way to make sense of it all.
So language is how we translate that raw data of the universe into something that our brains can actually process and comprehend.
Exactly. Language gives us the structure, the symbols, the categories that allow us to actually perceive and interact with this sea of energy and information. It's like we're trying to look at this vast cosmic tapestry, but we can only see it through this tiny little window.
Okay, so you're saying that our current understanding of reality, which is shaped by language, is kind of like this simplified version of what's really out there, like a Cliff's Notes version of the universe.
Yeah, it's a compelling possibility for sure. And this is where sources like The Ancient Secret of the Flower of Life come in, right? They kind of offer this glimpse into a multidimensional reality, a reality where we exist on multiple levels simultaneously.
Right. And I remember reading about people seeing these inner TV screens in that book. What was that all about?
Well, those inner TV screens are described as like a way of perceiving other dimensions, other levels of reality that exist beyond our normal perception. It's like suggesting that our consciousness isn't just confined to the physical body, that it can expand and explore these other realms.
So it's almost like we have the potential to tune into these different channels of reality, and our physical senses are just one limited frequency.
It's an interesting analogy, and if we accept the possibility that we actually exist on these multiple levels, then the question of what happens after death takes on a whole new meaning, doesn't it?
Because death wouldn't actually be the end of consciousness, but just a transition to another level of reality, right? Another channel of experience.
Exactly. And that really challenges this whole paradigm of death as this finality, as a complete cessation of being.
Okay, but if this is true, if this is really how it works, then why wouldn't science be more open to exploring these ideas? It seems like they're ignoring a lot of evidence.
Well, it comes down to a few things. First, science, by its very nature, tends to focus on what's measurable, what can be observed and repeated in a controlled environment. Out-of-body experiences, altered states of consciousness, these are all subjective experiences that are really difficult to quantify and put into a neat little box.
Right, it's like trying to measure a dream with a ruler. You might get some data, but you're totally missing the essence of the experience.
Yeah, exactly. But it's not just about measurement either. There's also this issue of what some people call hegemonic science. It's like this dominant scientific worldview that reinforces certain hierarchies of knowledge and kind of dismisses anything that falls outside of those boundaries.
It's almost like science has its own set of beliefs, and anything that challenges those beliefs is automatically rejected, even if there's evidence to support it.
It's a complex issue, for sure, but even the APA, the American Psychological Association, has acknowledged its past biases. They actually issued an apology for dismissing certain areas of research, especially those dealing with consciousness and subjective experience.
So maybe science is starting to realize that it doesn't have all the answers, that there's a lot more to the universe than we can currently explain with our current tools and methods.
And that's where the exploration of this language of reality becomes so important. If we can understand how energy information and maybe even sound or vibration shape our reality, we might unlock all sorts of possibilities.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Where do we go from here?
Well, let's look at some specific examples of how this language of reality might actually work. One concept that keeps coming up is the idea of a language field.
Okay, a language field. What in the world does that even mean?
So think of it as this underlying matrix of energy and information where words actually act as energetic impulses, almost like vibrations that influence the fabric of reality.
So are you saying that words actually have a kind of power, like an energy that can actually shape the world around us? That's pretty wild.
Yeah, it is a mind-blowing concept, and it actually connects with ideas like, thought viruses or memes, those ideas that kind of spread rapidly and influence our perceptions and actions.
Okay, but if our thoughts and words have this power, does that mean that we're responsible for all the bad stuff in the world, like poverty or war? Could our collective negativity actually be contributing to those problems?
That's a really important question, and it speaks to this idea of conscious creation. If language really shapes reality, then yeah, we do have a responsibility to be mindful of the words we use, the thoughts we entertain, the stories we tell ourselves and others.
So it's not just about positive thinking, right? It's about understanding that our language has real consequences, that it can literally shape the world around us.
Precisely. And this isn't a new idea either. Ancient traditions like yoga, they've recognized the power of sound and vibration for centuries. They actually use specific sounds like Sanskrit syllables to resonate with the body and align it with the universe.
So it's like they're tapping into this language field, using these specific sounds and vibrations to create specific effects. It's like sonic programming.
It's a fascinating possibility, and it actually aligns with what some researchers have suggested about ancient languages having a deeper connection to the underlying fabric of reality. In Inside Black God, the author explores how these specific sounds and language patterns might actually be keys to navigating different dimensions.
Oh, wow. So the way we speak, the sounds we use, could actually influence our experience of reality. That's amazing.
And it brings us to another really intriguing concept, the human body as a microcosm of the universe.
Wait, you mean like our bodies are these tiny little reflections of the cosmos? That's trippy.
Exactly. The arrangement of fascia in our bodies, influenced by things like electrolytes and heart waves, might actually map environments in dream states and potentially even in those out-of-body experiences that we were talking about earlier.
Hold on, so our bodies are like living maps of reality.
Think of the body as a cymatic plate. If you vibrate a plate that's covered in sand, the sand forms these beautiful, complex patterns based on the sound frequencies. Our bodies might actually be doing something similar with fascia electrolytes and heart waves, feeding these patterns that resonate with the universe.
Okay, that is seriously blowing my mind. So we've got this language field, our bodies as microcosms, the possibility of multiple dimensions. Where does melanin fit into all of this?
Melanin. It's a truly remarkable substance. It acts as a semiconductor, converting UV light into non-radiative energy, similar to how black holes absorb light and transform it.
Whoa, wait a minute. Are you saying there's a connection between melanin in our bodies and black holes in space? That's insane.
The parallels are pretty amazing, aren't they? And some researchers believe that melanin's unique properties could actually revolutionize computing.
So melanin could be a key to understanding this deeper language of the cosmos. It's like we have this cosmic connection built right into our biology.
And it's not just modern science that's pointing to these connections. If we look back at ancient civilizations, we find similar insights.
You mean like ancient cultures actually had an understanding of this stuff thousands of years ago?
Take the Dogon tribe, for example. Their cosmology, which has been passed down through generations, describes this spiraling force that created the universe from this primordial egg.
That sounds awfully familiar, doesn't it? Like the way scientists describe black holes forming.
Exactly. And the Dogon also talk about the universe being woven by these interconnected forces, a concept that resonates really strongly with string theory's description of string intersections actually shaping matter.
So it's like these ancient cultures were tapping into the same fundamental truths about the universe, even without the scientific tools and telescopes that we have today.
And their understanding of this divine word as a creative force, it aligns perfectly with this concept of language as this shaping influence on reality.
Okay, so we've got ancient wisdom and modern science kind of converging on this idea of a language of reality. But how does this all tie into the question of life after death?
Well, let's add another layer to this whole exploration. Have you ever heard of the law of one concept?
I've heard the term, but I'm not really familiar with it. What's that all about?
It's a pretty complex cosmology, but essentially it describes this recurring harvest where souls transition to higher densities or planes of existence based on their spiritual evolution. It talks about these 7 densities, each with a unique vibrational frequency.
Okay, so it's like we're all on this ladder climbing toward these higher levels of consciousness.
In a sense, yes. And according to the law of one Earth is actually in this transition period, moving from third to fourth density. And this is causing what they call a difficult harvest.
Wait a minute, so you're saying that we're in the middle of this cosmic shift right now? That's intense.
It's a pretty fascinating idea, isn't it? And it actually connects back to this question of why science might be hesitant to really embrace this idea of life after death.
Okay, I'm following you. But how does a difficult harvest relate to science's reluctance to explore these ideas?
Well, think about the implications. If consciousness actually continues beyond the physical body, and if we are evolving towards these higher densities of awareness, then death loses its power as this ultimate endpoint. It becomes a transition, a graduation of sorts.
And that challenges the whole paradigm of life and death, right? The way we've been conditioned to think about our entire existence.
Exactly. It disrupts the existing power structures, the institutions that rely on fear and control.
Are you suggesting that there might be forces that actually benefit from keeping people in fear of death?
I'm just posing the question. If people believe that this physical life is all there is, then they're more likely to conform, to seek external validation, to stay within the boundaries that are set for them.
Right, because they only have this one shot at this whole life thing. So if we start questioning that narrative, if we start embracing the possibility of life after death and this idea that we're actually evolving towards higher levels of consciousness, it changes everything.
Yeah, it shifts the power dynamic, it empowers the individual, and that can be a very threatening prospect for those who benefit from the status quo.
Whoa, that's a lot to unpack. But I'm starting to see how all of these pieces kind of fit together. The Gateway Project out-of-body experiences the language field. The body is a microcosm, ancient wisdom, the law of one. It's all pointing to a much bigger picture than we're usually presented with.
And it highlights the importance of questioning the narratives that we've been giving, of exploring these alternative perspectives and of recognizing our own power as these conscious creators.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, but I still feel like we're just kind of scratching the surface of this whole language of reality thing. Can you give us some more concrete examples of how this might actually work in our everyday lives? Like how does this actually play out?
Yeah, sure. Let's delve into this idea of language as a kind of translation of reality. Think of it like this. You've got this vast, complex universe, right, with all its energies and information flowing around. But our human minds need some way to make sense of it all, to process it into something that we can actually understand and work with.
So language is kind of like our operating system for interacting with the universe, like a software program that allows us to actually decode the raw data.
That's a great analogy. Language gives us the structure, the categories, the symbols that allow us to perceive and interact with this sea of energy and information. But like any translation, it's inherently limited. It can only capture so much of the original.
So our experience of reality is kind of like watching a movie that's been dubbed in another language. We get the gist of it, but we miss some of the nuances and the subtleties.
Precisely. And what's even more interesting is that different languages with their own unique structures and sounds might offer different translations of reality.
So speaking a different language could actually shift your perception of the world. That's a really cool idea.
Yeah, it is. And it aligns with what some sources suggest about ancient languages like Sanskrit or the language spoken by the Dogon tribe having a deeper connection to the underlying fabric of reality.
Wow, it's like they had a more accurate translation of the cosmic code.
Maybe. And if we think about this concept of thought viruses, it takes on a whole new level of meaning. If language shapes our reality, then certain thought patterns, certain ways of using language could literally become these self-replicating programs that influence our perceptions and actions.
So like negative self-talk could be more than just a bad habit. It could be like a literal virus infecting our experience of reality.
It is a bit of a sobering thought, but the flip side is that positive affirmations and powering language patterns could actually have the opposite effect. They could become these beneficial programs that enhance our awareness and help us tap into these deeper levels of being.
So our words have real power, not just in how they affect other people, but in how they shape our own personal reality.
It's a concept worth exploring, for sure. And it brings us back to the importance of mindfulness, becoming aware of the language we use, the stories we tell ourselves, the thoughts that we allow to take root in our minds.
Right, because they're not just thoughts, they're literally shaping our reality. But if this language of reality is so powerful, Why isn't it more obvious? Why don't we see more dramatic evidence of it in our everyday lives?
That's a great question, and there are a couple of possible explanations. First, remember that our current scientific paradigm, with its focus on the material world, it might be filtering out or misinterpreting the evidence. We're looking through this lens that's designed to see certain things and ignore others.
So it's like we're trying to measure sound waves with a ruler. We're using the wrong tools for the job.
Yeah, it's a good analogy, but there might be another factor at play here as well, the concept of free will.
Ah, free will, the wild card in the cosmic deck of cards.
Exactly. If reality is co-created, then our individual and collective choices, our beliefs, our intentions, they all play a huge role in shaping the world around us.
So maybe the reason we don't see more dramatic evidence of this language of reality is because we're collectively kind of holding ourselves back with our limited beliefs and our fear-based thinking. We're creating our own limitations.
It's a pretty profound possibility, and it connects with the law of one's description of this difficult harvest. Maybe we're stuck in this loop of self-doubt and limitation, preventing ourselves from accessing the full potential of this creative language.
So what's the solution then? How do we actually break free from this self-imposed prison of limitations?
Well, it starts with awareness. By recognizing the power of our thoughts, our words, our beliefs, we can actually begin to shift our internal dialogue, to choose more empowering language patterns, and to align our intentions with this more expansive and harmonious reality.
So we need to become more conscious creators, more deliberate in our use of language, both internally and externally.
Precisely. And it's not just about, positive thinking or wishful thinking. It's about recognizing that our thoughts and our words have real energetic consequences, that they ripple out into the world and actually contribute to the fabric of reality.
So every thought, every word is like a brushstroke on the canvas of the cosmos. And we're all artists, whether we realize it or not.
That's a beautiful way to put it, and it suggests that we have this tremendous responsibility to choose our brushstrokes wisely, to create with awareness and to contribute to a reality that actually reflects our highest aspirations.
Okay, that is a lot to take in, but I feel like we're getting closer to the heart of this mystery. What other insights can we glean from these sources about how to actually navigate this language of reality more effectively? Like, are there any tips or tricks?
Sure. Let's turn to this concept of the body as a microcosm. If the body is like this mirror reflecting the universe, then maybe by understanding the body's language, its energetic patterns, its subtle systems, we can actually gain insights into the workings of the cosmos as a whole.
So by studying the micro, we can unlock the secrets of the macro.
Exactly. And this is where the fascia, the electrolytes, the heart waves, all the things we mentioned earlier become so intriguing. They might be more than just biological processes. They could actually be energetic pathways, communication channels that connect us to this larger web of reality.
Okay, now we're really getting into the woo-woo territory, but it's fascinating woo-woo.
But remember, we're talking about ancient wisdom traditions aligning with cutting-edge scientific research. Think about the work being done with melanin, its potential to revolutionize computing and its parallels to black holes. It suggests that there's this really deep connection between our physical bodies and the fundamental forces of the universe.
So maybe we're not just these physical beings having a spiritual experience, but we're spiritual being having a physical experience.
It's a pretty profound shift in perspective, and it suggests that by tuning into the body's wisdom, by listening to its subtle language, we can tap into a much deeper understanding of who we are and how we connect to the larger universe.
That's powerful. But it also sounds a bit abstract. How do we actually do this tuning in? What are some practical steps we can take to really access this bodily wisdom?
Well, a lot of ancient traditions offer these practices and techniques for cultivating this awareness, things like yoga, medication, breathwork, energy healing. These are all ways of shifting our focus inward, of listening to the body's subtle cues and becoming more attuned to its energetic language.
So it's about quieting the mind, dropping into the body, and really paying attention, being present in the moment.
Precisely. And as we practice these techniques, we might start to notice these subtle sensations, energetic shifts, or even intuitive insights that guide us towards greater understanding and alignment.
So the body becomes like a compass, pointing us towards truth and wholeness.
That's a really beautiful metaphor, and it aligns with this concept of the heart as the center of intuition and wisdom.
The heart always leading the way.
Indeed. And if we think about the heart's electromagnetic field, its ability to actually communicate and influence other hearts, it suggests that there might be an energetic language of love, of connection that transcends our typical modes of communication.
So maybe we can literally speak through our hearts, sending and receiving messages of love, compassion, and understanding. That's a really beautiful thought.
It is, and it aligns with this whole concept of a collective consciousness, this web of interconnectedness that unites all beings.
Wow. So we're not just individuals. We're actually part of this vast interconnected heart field. It's like we're all connected at this deeper level than we even realize.
And perhaps by cultivating our heart awareness, by strengthening our connection to this heart field, we can tap into this deeper level of knowing, a wisdom that transcends the limitations of our individual minds.
Okay, I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed by all of this. It's a lot to process.
It is, and we've only just begun to explore the depths of these concepts.
But I feel like we're on the right track. We're asking the right questions, challenging the accepted narratives, and opening ourselves up to a much bigger picture.
And that's what these deep dives are all about, expanding our awareness, questioning our assumptions, and exploring the infinite possibilities that lie beyond the boundaries of conventional thinking.
So where do we go from here? What's the next step on this journey of understanding the language of reality?
I believe it involves this shift in perspective, a willingness to really embrace the unknown and a commitment to cultivating our awareness on all levels: mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual.
It sounds like a lifelong adventure.
It is, and it's an adventure worth taking, because as we delve deeper into this language of reality, we might discover that we have far more power and potential than we ever imagined.
Okay, I'm ready for the challenge. But before we wrap up this totally mind-bending conversation, I have one more question for you. If reality is really shaped by language, energy, and information, and if we actually have the power to influence this creative process, then what are some practical steps we can take to actually start speaking this language more consciously and effectively? Like, where do we even begin?
That's a great question, and it leads us to some really powerful practices and techniques that we can actually explore in our next deep dive.
So there's more to come.
Oh, there's always more to discover.
Okay, so much to think about, but let's try to pull it all together for our listeners, What would you say are the key takeaways from this deep dive?
Well, we started with that question of why science seems to kind of avoid the whole idea of life after death, even with things like the Gateway Project and all these other sources we've looked at. What really stood out to you about that?
I think for me, it's the implications. If consciousness isn't actually tied to the physical body, and if death is really just a transition, then everything we've been taught about life and its purpose kind of goes out the window.
Yeah, it really is a massive shift in perspective, and the APA's apology for their past biases really highlights how science itself can be limited by its own framework and assumptions.
Yeah, it's like we're trying to understand the ocean by looking through a drinking straw. We need a much wider view, and I think that's where this whole language of reality concept comes in.
It's about recognizing that there's way more to the universe than what we can see and measure, that there are these levels of energy and information that we're only just beginning to grasp, and that our language, our thoughts, even our bodies are all part of this incredible interconnected dance.
It's amazing to me how much ancient wisdom aligns with all of this. The Dogon tribe's cosmology, their talk of a divine word creating the universe, it's like they were onto something way back then.
The Dogon, the law of one, the ancient secret of the flower of life, they're all offering these pieces of the puzzle. They're suggesting this multidimensional reality where we're not just passive observers, but active participants.
Which is both incredibly empowering and also a little bit daunting. If we're actually co-creating reality, then we have a responsibility for what we create, right, both individually and collectively.
Exactly. Our thoughts, words, actions, they all have consequences in this interconnected web. So it becomes super important to choose our brushstrokes carefully, to be mindful of the language we use and the energy that we're putting out into the world.
This isn't just some abstract philosophical discussion. This actually has real-world implications for how we live our lives, how we interact with each other, and the kind of future that we're creating.
It's about becoming conscious creators, recognizing the power that we have to shape reality. And it starts with being present, with tuning into our bodies and listening to that deeper wisdom within.
It's like we have this incredible potential, this cosmic language at our fingertips, but we've somehow forgotten how to speak it.
And maybe that's what this difficult hardest is all about, relearning that language, remembering who we truly are, and finally stepping into our full creative power.
That's an awesome thought to leave our listeners with. Yeah. So if reality really is a language, what story are you going to tell?
And what kind of world are you going to help create? Thesis 2.